What's going on, boys? I'm in Advantage and welcome back to another NHL 22 HUT video. In today's video, we'll be discussing the best superstar abilities for your HUT team. This marks the second video in the series where we rank the best zone abilities, the best superstar abilities, as well as how to divvy up those ability points so you have the best chance of success. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next one that's coming out. But without any further ado, let's get right into today's video. Guys, one of the things to note before we get started today is that not every single zone and superstar ability is out yet. So while it may be here in the glossary, it may not necessarily be activated or on any players yet. So just something to keep in mind when we're going through these. A lot of the zone and superstar abilities are also dependent on your play styles. So I will be giving you my most unbiased advice when it does come to that, as well as which ones would be more advantageous depending on how you play the game. To make this video even better, I'm gonna be giving you guys these zone and superstar ability point totals, so you can come back and reference this in the future if need be. Something to also keep in mind is that superstar ability points are going to be half of what the zone ability requires. So for example, if we take something like wheels, that will be 10 zone ability points that would be required, versus if it's a superstar ability, it would only be 5 points. So keep that in mind throughout all of these examples. That is going to be how it works. Let's get right into it. Guys, you may notice that my tone does change up a bit today as far as what's worth activating and what isn't, being that the zone abilities are double the points of the superstar abilities. In the video following this one, where I talk about what ability points you should and shouldn't activate, we'll also go over some different schools of thought in regards to both of these. But the first one up is adventure. As we mentioned before, this is when the goalie is going to have advanced speed, acceleration, and agility essentially when they're out of their net. Regardless if it's 1 ability point, 2 ability points, even if it's 0 ability points, I would not activate this one. It doesn't make any sense to use. Up next is all alone for 3 ability points. This is going to provide the player with an exceptional power and accuracy when on penalty shots and breakaways. I would probably steer clear of activating this one unless you play a lot on the rush. If that's your game and you have somebody like Kevin Fiala, even at an 84 overall, his acceleration and speed is an 88. So he would have a lot more chances than somebody like JT Miller, who's a bit slower and really may not make sense to activate on because he's not going to be having those opportunities to have breakaways and shots with that slower speed. Up next is all or nothing, which is the exceptional range, accuracy, and recovery when poke checking for a goaltender. So it's only 1 ability point, could potentially be worth activating. I mentioned this yesterday in a lot of my videos. The reason I was so back and forth on a lot of the zone abilities is because they cost quite a bit. If you need to fill a slot, and oftentimes that is the case where there's only 1 ability point, throw it on your goaltender, test it out. Different goaltenders react differently to their superstar abilities as well as the other stats that they have on. So keep that in mind. I've tested a couple out that I thought would be good for a goaltender as a zone or superstar ability. Turned out it wasn't the case. There was also some that I tested out that I thought would not be very good. They turned out to be well for that particular goaltender. So with the goaltender ones, test those out for the majority of what you're doing. Again, all or nothing, I've seen it work in ways where the goaltender's been more aggressive and it has worked out in their favor. I've also scored goals on goalies that had this activated, being that they overcompensated for the poke check. Up next is ankle breaker for 4 ability points. It's going to provide the player exceptional ability to deke opponents at top speed. I actually really do like this one as a superstar ability. For only 4 ability points, it makes a lot of sense. For example, the base Connor McDavid does have this superstar ability. I did have this activated on him for a while and I tested it out, and there actually was a pretty noticeable difference whenever he had this activated versus when he didn't. So for 4 ability points, I think it's very worth it for somebody like McDavid. On the flip side of that coin, if you're looking at somebody like Patrick Laine, 84 speed, 84 acceleration, obviously he has 5 zone here, so it'll boost him up. But if you're looking at a slower card, I probably wouldn't activate it because somebody like Laine, 6'5", 205, he's really sluggish to begin with. I don't think ankle breaker is going to be that much of a noticeable difference. And you're basically just throwing 4 ability points out the window, in my opinion. Next up is back at you for 3 ability points. It's going to be the increased ability to knock opponents off the puck and essentially zap their energy. I had this activated on Sidney Crosby. I have this Crosby card on my team. Totally not worth it, in my opinion. In my play style, it did not fit me. I don't hit a lot of players. If you're not throwing a lot of hits, don't activate it. You're throwing 3 ability points out the window, or 6 if it's the zone ability. However, if you do hit a lot of players, then this may make sense for you and your team to activate. Next up is Beauty Backhand. In my opinion, this is one of the best zone and superstar abilities that you could throw on. It's going to provide the player exceptional power and accuracy when shooting on the backhand. Long story short, their backhand shots are going to go in more often. Somebody like Patrick Kane, somebody like Mitch Marner, William Nylander, Braden Point, really all these guys are going to be in and around the net. And if that's your play style, 1000% activate this one. The backhand, especially coming around the net, is going to be one of the most OP goals in the game this year. Definitely throw this one on. Next up is Big Rig for 3 ability points. It's the exceptional strength and agility when driving to the net. Whenever you're protecting the puck, and essentially your stronger free hand is going to be able to hold off the defender when you're cutting to the net. So if you're holding A, you're holding X, and you're protecting the puck, that's when Big Rig is going to become activated. In my opinion, I did sleep on this one earlier this year. It wasn't really my play style as much. However, I did have Barkov on my team. I rocked with him for a little bit. And for 3 ability points, especially for your bigger players like a Barkov, like a Scheifele, like a Draisaitl, like a Chuck, really all these guys for the most part. If that's your play style, and if you have a big centerman, I think this one's fantastic. I think it's the most underrated zone or superstar ability out there for only 3 ability points. Especially throw this one on. I promise you, you will notice a difference. Next up is Big Tipper for 3 ability points. It's going to be the advanced speed, accuracy, and range when you're deflecting shots. Really long story short, if this player deflects a shot, you're gonna have a more advantage for it to go in because it's going to be more accurate, quicker, and get there better. In my opinion, Big Tipper is great for centerman. So I do like the fact that it is on John Tavares here, especially for a little bit of a slower card, and that's your game taking shots from the point where there's going to be a lot of deflections, activate it. If that's not your game, don't activate it. Again, align these zone and superstar abilities to how you play. We will talk about that in our different schools of thought later in which abilities to activate and how to set these up. But whenever you're buying these players in the auction house or whether you're building your team, just something to keep in mind is John Tavares, for example, with Big Tipper, is that going to be advantageous for you and your team and your play style? Next up is Born Leader for 1 ability point. It boosts team energy essentially whenever this player scores a goal. It's going to be half the energy boost for a superstar ability and double the boost if you have it as a zone ability. If this person's on your first line, maybe activate it. So like, let's say for example, you're rocking with Koivu here, right? And he can easily be a first or second line center on a lot of teams. So it could make sense. For 1 ability point, sure, go ahead and throw it on. It wouldn't be one that I initially looked to activate, but if you're filling a slot, let's say you're at 39 ability points and you need 1 more, yeah, like definitely throw it on. Makes sense. Next up is Bounce Back. We talked about this one yesterday. It's 1 ability point, and long story short, it's going to reduce your chance of injury and with increased recovery speed from injuries if you get injured once in the game. Unless you're getting absolutely bodied out there, as we talked about, don't activate this one. It doesn't make any sense. Following that is Bouncer for 2 ability points. It's going to be the exceptional at battles around the net. Greatly increases your stability, stick tension, and limb strength around the net. Opposing players take longer to recover from net battles. So, in my opinion, it makes a lot of sense for defensemen, and obviously that's why you see it on defensemen, because they're going to be in and around the net, and they're going to be essentially keeping players out of the slot. So if you find a lot of goals scored on you in that area, which again, we talked about earlier, that is how a lot of goals are scored in this game. That's how a lot of players are trying to play, is drive that puck in the slot. Obviously, that's where a lot of goals are scored in real life as well. So yeah, it certainly could make sense to activate. I've had this on a couple of my players. I think it totally makes sense, especially for only 2 ability points. Next up for 2 ability points is Butterfly Effect. Advanced reflexes when making butterfly saves. As I mentioned earlier, with any of these goaltender zone or superstar abilities, they may sound good on the surface, they may sound terrible on the surface, and other than adventure, I would just play around with these. So for example, like this Vasilevsky, activate it, play 20 games. If he plays better with it on and you see a noticeable difference, keep it. If you don't see a noticeable difference or if he plays worse, take it off. Next up for 5 ability points is Close Quarters, which is going to allow the player greater power and accuracy whenever they're shooting in and around the net. So for example, I had this on Ray Ferraro. When I had him on my team earlier in the year, he does not currently make my team just based on his stats. However, there was a very, very noticeable difference when I had this on. I actually really think this is one of the best superstar abilities you can throw on too. And again, keep in mind, if you're taking this player in and around the net, like for example, I had Ferraro in and around there because he's my centerman. He was in the slot a lot and it made a lot of sense. But if you're not really driving to the net a lot with your players, or that's not necessarily your play style, probably wouldn't activate it. However, in my opinion, for the goals that are scored this game this year, Close quarters is 1000% worth it. Next up is Contortionist. Another goaltender synergy for 2 ability points is going to allow them exceptional save range, recovery, and save ability while in spread V or against momentum. I know I'm beating a dead horse here, guys, but take my advice. Throw it on your goaltender, play 20 to 25 games. If you see a noticeable difference, leave it on. If you don't, take it off. Up next is Crease Crasher for 3 ability points. It's going to allow the player exceptional ability to corral bouncing pucks off of rebounds and increases their shot accuracy on rebounds as well. Rebounds are the name of the game this year. I've seen a lot of just crappy ones go in, especially against me. You know, that's how it always works in NHL. However, I think that rebounds are already so OP that it really is not worth the 3 ability points for this. However, if you take a lot of shots just in the goalie's pads and you'd like to play the rebound a lot, that's your play style, then consider putting it on. Again, the reason I'm so back and forth on a lot of these is because for somebody like me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. However, if you take a lot of those shots and you shoot for a rebound and you score goals that way, and that's kind of what your play style is, what you're aiming to do, one of your strategies, then throw in Crease Crasher. Next up is Dialed In for 2 ability points. It's going to boost your goaltender's save ability after they make 15 saves in a game. I would not throw this one on. Next up is Elite Edges for 4 ability points. It's going to be the exceptional maneuverability with the ability to turn tight corners while retaining high speed. So I have certainly noticed this one. My X Factor, Cale Makar, has this on. And in my opinion, for 4 ability points, you really can't go wrong with this one, especially if you have somebody like a Makar or, for example, a Quinn Hughes, who's obviously pretty fast, and you're gonna be breaking out of your own zone with them on. It's certainly a noticeable difference. And in my opinion, it can really help you get out of your zone or enter into the offensive zone with one of these players. Another goaltender synergy, extra padding for 2 ability points. It's going to be the greater ability for your goaltender to save slap shots. Would not activate this one. For 1 ability point is Handled It. It's going to be a boost of energy to your team whenever this goaltender makes a save on a 1-on-1. So whether it's a breakaway or a penalty shot, I wouldn't throw this one on either. In my opinion, definitely not worth it. Next up for 4 ability points, we have Heatseeker, which is going to be the exceptional power and accuracy when taking wrist or snapshots from a distance. Keyword, from a distance. In my opinion, it makes a lot of sense to activate it on your defenders. So if you have somebody like Tyson Barrie, somebody like Cale Makar, for example, I think it definitely does make a lot of sense, especially if you take a lot of those wrist shots and you're either looking for a deflection or looking to just sneak one through some bodies from the point. However, if you have somebody like Jared McCann, for example, I happen to have this card. He doesn't start, but I actually threw it on with him just to test it out. And I didn't notice any difference at all, especially because I play a lot of in and around the net. I'm trying to go for some of those snipes. I like to work the puck in and around. And typically I don't have McCann at the point or from a distance enough for this to come into play. So final thoughts on this one, activate it for your defenders if that is your game. And I would just leave it off of my centermen or wingers if they have it as well. Next up for 1 ability point is Ice Pack, which is great shot blocking ability. It's really just going to enhance that. I don't find this one worth it. Don't throw it on. Unless you just had to fill a slot, that's the only reason I would throw it on. Next up for 2 ability points is In Reverse. It's going to enhance your defender's backskating ability. So let's say you have somebody like Heiskanen or you have somebody like Ray Bourque. I've come up against this one. Letang, for example, has this as a zone ability. It's definitely noticeable. I have not personally used it as a superstar ability, so I would have to imagine that it's still very good because I used it on Letang and it was extremely noticeable. And if you've played against players that have this on, you definitely see it. So go ahead and try this one out. In my opinion, if you find yourself getting burned a lot or in a lot of 2-on-1 opportunities coming the other way, throw this on, it's gonna help you. Next up for 3 ability points is It's Tricky. It's gonna help your player have advanced ability to make trick dekes while increasing their shot accuracy whenever they come out of those trick dekes. My opinion, probably not worth it unless you're just trying to have fun. And hey, if that's your game, maybe it's worth it. I think this is more of just a fun one. You know, if you're in squad battles or if you're just playing online and just trying to have a good time and make some cool goals, whether it's like the Michigan goal, for example, or whatever it may be, the Datsuk, whatever. I probably would not throw this one on though, guys, unless you're just looking to have a good time. Next up for 2 ability points is Last Stand. It's going to enhance your goaltender's save ability whenever they are in a breakaway or penalty shot situation. In my opinion, probably not worth it. Hopefully you're not giving up that many penalty shots and or breakaways. Again, play with it. Like I mentioned in any of the goaltender synergies, you could potentially throw it on. I just don't think Last Stand is gonna come into play that much. Also, if you're in the higher divisions, you're gonna notice that a lot of players just know how to execute on the breakaway. and you're just throwing 2 ability points out the window, in my opinion. Next up is light work. For 2 ability points, it's going to enhance your goaltender's save ability when they go against wrist shots. So I actually happen to have a handful of these 88 flurries, and I threw this on. Yeah, it's pretty legit. I kind of like it. So for 2 ability points, in my opinion, definitely worth it. Throw this one on. I like this one. Next up for 3 ability points is magnetic. It's going to help this player pick up pucks at speed, control bouncing or rolling pucks, and also reel in less than ideal passes. So if you make a lot of less than ideal passes like me in NHL 22, it potentially could be worth activating. In my opinion though, I don't think I would activate magnetic as a zone or superstar ability. I just don't think it makes sense. Up next for 5 ability points, make it snappy. It's going to allow this player exceptional power and accuracy when they're taking snapshots while skating towards the net. If your play style is ripping towards the net and taking a lot of snapshots, especially on the rush, 1000% activate this. I've had it on a couple players. You could definitely see a noticeable difference. I have it on my Austin Matthews X Factor, for example, and it's an extreme noticeable difference. Even if you're not coming in on the rush, even if you're just in and around the net taking snapshots, this one comes into play a lot more than I originally had thought it would when I first started playing the game. So in my opinion, for 5 ability points, if this person's on your first, second, or maybe even on your third line, I consider throwing it on. It makes that much of a difference. Up next for 1 ability point is no contest. It's going to enhance this player's puck batting ability and have them coming away with a greater chance to win the puck. I would consider throwing this one on for only 1 ability point. I think it's more of a slot filler than anything else, obviously, at 1 ability point. However, if you're choosing between the other ones that are available, I think this is probably one of the best 1 ability point ones that you could toss on. Next up is no timer for 2 ability points. It's going to have the enhanced save ability and reactions to 1-timers for goaltenders. So if you're finding that a lot of 1-timer goals are scored on you, go ahead and test this one out. Next up for 4 ability points is off the rush. It's going to enhance this player's slap shot ability when they're skating. So hey, maybe somebody like Ovi, it could potentially make sense if you take a lot of slappers, maybe throw it on. Totally not worth it on the zone ability for 8 points in my opinion, but on the superstar ability for only 4 points, maybe it's worth it if they're on your top line. So that's like the only reason I could see it, for example. If you had Ovi on your top line and you take a lot of slap shots, okay, maybe. However, I just don't see off the rush coming into play that much unless you're just ripping clappers all day. Next up for 5 ability points is 1T. It's going to enhance this player's ability to score goals, quite frankly, whenever they're taking 1-time shots. I go back and forth on this one. I've used it as a zone ability. I've used it as a superstar ability. I found that it definitely does help. However, I found myself almost trying to force 1-timers to that particular player. Like for example, I had it on Stamkos. I tried to force 1-timers to him and I was just taking terrible shots. And I felt like with 1T activated on a particular player, I was trying to force too many things. However, if you take a lot of 1-timers, if you have this player on your first or second line, and also especially if they're on your power play, and you set up a lot of 1-timers, I think it really could be worth it for only 5 ability points. Go ahead and throw it on. For me personally, however, it took me off my game a little bit too much and I was trying to force too many things to get it to that player, but that was just me being stupid. Next up for 2 ability points is post to post. It's gonna allow this goaltender a boost in making saves when they go post to post. But I've talked about this one in my previous video. As I mentioned with all these goaltender synergies, guys, throw them on, test them out, see if they work. If they don't, take them off. If they do, leave them on. Next up for 4 ability points is puck on a string. It's going to provide this player exceptional toe drag and stick handling speed and ability. So I had this rocking with Peter Forsberg for a while. I tried him out and I've also had it on McKinnon. I actually really like this one. It's almost a no-brainer to me if this person's on your first or second line. I don't know about having it on a defenseman. I have not used it on any defenseman, so I really couldn't tell you there. I will probably submit that it wouldn't be just because it doesn't really make a lot of sense. However, for any of your wingers or your centermen even, I think it really is going to make a noticeable difference. Next up for 3 ability points is quick draw. It's going to allow exceptional quickness on face-off draws, greatly increase the effectiveness on tie-up wins, as well as help them win defensive zone draws. I had this one activated. I did not notice any noticeable difference whatsoever. So in my opinion, personally, 1000% not worth it. Up next for 2 ability points is quick pick. It's going to allow this player an exceptional ability to intercept pucks and also significantly increases their range when they're intercepting pucks. Yes, I've had this activated. I 1,000,000% think this is worth it. Please turn this one on if you have it on a player. Next up for 4 ability points is Seeing Eye. It's going to allow this player exceptional power and accuracy on shots when the goalie is screened. Also, that goalie's reaction time is going to be greatly reduced whenever this player takes a shot with this ability if they are screened. So I've used this one. I've noticed that it did make a difference, but I just didn't really see it happening as much. And again, that's not my play style as much, so that's really the reason for that. If your play style is taking a lot of those shots from the point, using screens to your advantage, getting a lot of people in front of the net and in the slot, I really think for a superstar ability at only 4 ability points, this is probably worth throwing on your top pairing defenseman at the very least. Next up for 2 ability points is Send It. It's going to increase this player's ability to make those long auto saucer passes as well as help with their passing skills with the pass assist on. I had this activated on a Morgan Riley, which is right here. I had him earlier in the year and I had this turned on. I didn't notice a huge difference. In the higher divisions, as I mentioned earlier with Send It, a lot of players are already looking for that pass to come out of the zone, so it's a little bit more difficult to make those long passes like that. However, I did notice a difference in just passing in general, so could be potentially worth throwing on for only 2 ability points. I just didn't find that it was the best use of ability points in my opinion. Next up for 5 ability points is Snipe. Phenomenal skill to settle pucks with an exceptional wrist shot power and accuracy coming off of settled pucks. I personally have not had success with this one. However, there are some people in the community that I've seen use this like nobody's business, especially on somebody like Alex Ovechkin with obviously, look at his shot stats already to begin with. Snipe is kind of like Make It Snappy. I feel like this one in the beginning, I underrated it. I didn't think it was going to be activated as much. However, I played against a lot of people that have used Snipe and it seems to be activated a lot more. Final conclusion on Snipe, if you have somebody on your first or second line, for 5 ability points, I would 1000% consider throwing it on. Next up for 4 ability points is Shock and Awe. It's going to enhance this player's shooting ability and ability to score a goal when they're coming out of a toe drag. I really don't love the animation, but if you love the animation, and hey, you have somebody like Barzell on your first or second line, maybe even third line, it really could potentially be worth it. I don't think it'd be worth it on somebody like a Morgan Riley, especially because his shot accuracy to begin with is only an 81, and I don't think you're getting your bang for your buck with Shock and Awe. But somebody like Matthew Barzell, as I mentioned, with 90 shot accuracy, 87 wrist shot power, yeah, it potentially could be worth it if you can at least do that animation a couple times a game. You might be able to get a goal off. Next up for 1 ability point is Shutdown. It's going to be the exceptional accuracy when poke checking against momentum or at speed, and also greatly improves shot blocking and hitting strength while defending. I've used Shutdown on players for 1 ability point. Definitely throw this on. Next up for 3 ability points is SPIN-O-RAMA. It's going to enhance this player's shot and pass accuracy whenever they come out of a spin. I did actually have this on. Right in the beginning of the game, I tested it out. I found that it actually worked pretty good. However, if you're in the higher divisions and you're spinning around like that, you're gonna get absolutely bodied out there, or you're gonna get the puck taken off you in 2 seconds. So in my opinion, it's not worth it. It's almost like it's tricky if you're just looking to have fun and score some cool goals. Maybe throw it on, otherwise I would leave this one on the sideline. Next up is Sponge. It's going to enhance a goaltender's rebound control as well as enhance their ability to make those redirected controlled saves. So I really think this one is totally worth it for 2 ability points. Again though, with some of these guys, on the surface they look great, and then in play they don't maybe play as well. So as I mentioned earlier, with all these goaltender synergies, test them out first. If they work, fantastic. If they don't, take them off. Next up for 2 ability points is Stick 'em Up. It's going to enhance this player's defensive stick speed and give them exceptional accuracy when poke checking against momentum or at speed, and greatly reduces the chances of them taking a penalty. So if you're button mashing RB, for example, throw it on. I think for 2 ability points, it really makes a lot of sense for some of your defensemen. Again, we'll talk about some of the strategies behind all this later in another video. However, for 2 ability points, I think Stick 'em Up is probably going to be worth it for you. Next up for 3 ability points is Tape to Tape. Please throw this on. I'm just gonna come out right out of the gate and say this right now. Throw this one on. I had this activated on my Halloween rivals, Claude Giroux, and there is 1000% a noticeable difference when he does have Tape to Tape on. He gets some nasty passes through. Like some passes where it's almost like I'm back in NHL 21. It's like, how in the world did that get through? So this one's gonna give them an advanced power and accuracy on all passes that are within their vision. Keyword within their vision. It's also going to auto-sauce passes when necessary, which I found that actually is the case a lot, especially in your offensive zone. So that is going to be Tape to Tape for 3 ability points. On the flip side of that coin, you have Third Eye for 3 ability points. It's going to work the same exact way. However, the key difference here is it's going to be passes that are out of this player's vision. I found that both of these are pretty much equal. In my opinion, if you have somebody on your first or second line with this superstar ability, maybe even your third line, definitely throw it on and make sure you have this activated, or at least one of these passing synergies activated on your power play. Up next for 4 ability points is Thunderclap. It's going to provide exceptional power and accuracy when taking slap shots from the point. If you take a lot of point shots, I would consider throwing this on. However, I would probably not activate this for 4 ability points. Like let's say, for example, you had Shea Weber, right? And he is your third line defenseman. Probably not worth throwing on. He's your third line D. He's not going to be out there that much. Conversely, however, if you had, for example, this Victor Hedman at the point, he's on your first line pairing, maybe it's worth throwing on. Again, be smart about this, and we're going to talk about this a little bit later in that video, as I mentioned. However, just something to consider whenever you're building out your team. Next up for 2 ability points is Tip Jar. It's going to enhance your goaltender's ability to make saves on deflections. I think potentially could be worth it. Again, I'm going to stop saying it at this point. You guys already know what to do with the goaltender, superstar, and zone abilities. Up next for 2 ability points is Total Eclipse. It's going to enhance this player's ability to screen the goaltender. And at the end of the day, if you have this player in front of the net, enhance that puck's ability to get into the back of it. Potentially could be worth it if you take a lot of shots from the point. If you don't, if that's not your play style, like it's not mine, for example, don't activate it. Up next for 2 ability points is Truculence. It's going to provide this player exceptional stability and assist on shoulder checks. Also increases their chance of knocking over the opponent and sapping their energy. I think this is one of the best ones, in my opinion, that you could throw on if you're bumping into players. Even if you just give them that subtle bump, I found that it comes into play a lot. I would throw this one on your first, second, or maybe even your third line, as well as your first and second line D pairings. Next up for 4 ability points is Unstoppable Force. It's going to provide this player exceptional strength with the puck and a greater increased ability to hold on to the puck when off balance. In my opinion, this is 1,000,000% worth it. I had this on base Sidney Crosby before I upgraded him to the Halloween version. 10,000% worth it. Please throw this on. We talked about wheels yesterday for 5 ability points. It's going to obviously enhance this player's speed ability. Look at my team here for a moment. You can see that I do have wheels activated on McKinnon. Again, he's at 92 speed, 92 acceleration, so it definitely makes sense for him, as well as Jack Eichel. He's already at 93 speed and 91 acceleration. I find that it's a noticeable difference for both of these guys. Up next for 2 ability points is Whirlwind. It's going to provide a considerable energy boost for all of your skaters on the team after this goalie makes 3 saves within 5 seconds. Please don't throw this one on. Following that is X-Ray for 2 ability points. Screens are going to have a much less impact to your goaltender's vision. Play around with it, as we mentioned with the previous goaltender's energies. Lastly is Yoink for 2 ability points. Exceptional accuracy when stick lifting against momentum or at speed, as well as opposing players take much longer to recover from stick lifts. I have used this one on a couple of different players. I find that it is very effective, especially for only 2 ability points. That's it for me on this one, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you did like the video, make sure you go ahead and click like. And also, you don't want to miss that next one coming out. It will be out later today, so make sure you go ahead and subscribe and turn on notifications. Again, I'm Main Advantage. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.